The first question actually goes that, do you remember when you heard metal music for the first time?
Yes, I do. But it was kind of second hand, because it was before I started school, and my friends who were twins, who were 2 years older than me, had started school, and they had heard We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister at school, and they came back and sang it to me, and I was immediately a fan.
So what made you become a musician then? Were there like some certain bands that sort of like sparked you to become a musician?
Eventually, you know, some bands had more of an impact, for sure. But I guess I always showed an interest. So I started playing piano when I was about 6 because my grandma had a piano, and I was always fiddling around. And my parents had some acoustic guitars. I was fiddling around with that. So I got lessons for piano, and I got my first electric when I was 10. And I grew up on a farm, so there was really nothing else to do. I had an electric organ, you know, with bass pedals and everything, so I would jam along for myself. So I really can't remember not doing music. And I bought Kiss Rock and Roll Over when I was 10, just based on the cover, you know. There were some late night rock shows at Norwegian television, showing, you know, Dio and Twisted Sister videos and stuff like that. So I quite early on became a huge Twisted Sister fan. I had pink and black curtains in my room based on Dee Snider's costume. And then at 13, I think, I was introduced to Iron Maiden, saw the Seventh Son tour, and never had a plan B for my life after that show.
So was Iron Maiden the sort of like band that get you into like more extreme type of metal? Or
for sure. So, and I practically learned playing guitar from playing along to Seventh Son in particular, but also all the Iron Maiden records. And then, you know, Judas Priest, and then it just gradually evolved from there.
So what made you pick up the microphone then?
Probably out of necessity, that no one else wanted to sing.
The normal story.
The normal story. It's like, you know, why did you become a bass player? Well, I was the worst guitar player. You know?
So was Emperor the sort of like first proper band that you had, or did you have like bands before Emperor as well?
Oh, no. I mean, I'd been in 2 or 3 bands by the time I was 12. I think, because immediately when I got an electric guitar, I started a band with my classmate, and we would do class shows, you know.
Okay.
And Notodden, where I still live, has Northern Europe's biggest blues festival. So, and that started in '88, and in '89 they kind of hosted the first kind of youth camp, in a sense that, you know, kids from the local area could, you know, apply and go there, and they were like teachers, and they put together bands of the people who were there and learn some songs and blah blah blah. So basically anyone who my age and a bit older applied, and it was from the whole area. So that's where I met Samos, and I had my CV on the outside because I was wearing my denim jacket with all our Maiden patches, and I had long blonde hair, so I looked the part, you know. And he asked me to join his band. He's a year older than me, and he already played. I was 13, and he played with people who were like 16. So basically, I felt I was joining a professional band, and they had been to a studio and recorded songs. So I was pretty excited about that. And you know how it is in that day. You know, there are different iterations of the band. You change some members, and you change the name, and we also changed the genre. You know, so the first band we played in was like a heavy metal style band, like Iron Maiden. We did some, you know, King Diamond covers kind of thing. And then there was a period of some thrash metal, and Samos started a side project called Exracia, which was more death metal oriented, and I joined that which changed the name from. They recorded some demos under that, a name called under Embryonic, and that evolved into Thou Shalt Suffer, where we did an EP on a Mexican label, and to me, I remember it as a long time. But of course, all this, from I met him and started playing with Samuel when I was 13, till we signed with Candlelight Records with Emperor when I was 16. It's only 3 years, and we went from heavy metal to black metal in that time, and recorded some demos and some EPs in between. So so it's just like very, very gradual,
So when you started doing like more extreme type of vocals, were there like some vocalists that you sort of like first mimicked before you sort of figured out your own way to do things, or how did you sort of like develop the voice you have today?
Well, the ironic thing is that I started, very, very deep, like very deep death metal vocals. Was very fascinated, with Carcass and how deep they could go and everything. But through the death metal thing, I think the only thing that really sticks with me is David Vincent from Morbid Angel, because he really stood out because he's so good at diction.
He's gonna be the next guest later today.
Oh, brilliant! Brilliant! I hope to see him around, because I mean. And I still remember, around in the Nights of the Eclipse, the first Emperor album, we went to see Morbid Angel, and I think we were backstage, and David Vincent came up to me and was like, "Yeah, it's a great album you guys have out." So he knew who we were. That's kind of a big moment, I remember.
So it was like both were fanboying each other.
I probably it's more for me fanboying him at that point, but no, it's and he still stands out. Glenn Benton for sure, but David Vincent would have this trickle. You could hear he meant every word. So that's for extreme vocals. I started out as death metal vocals with Embryonic and Thou Shalt Suffer, and then when we came around to Emperor, we wanted to do more of a black metal thing, and a distinguishing thing was of course the brighter, more higher pitched vocals of Quarton. And to this day, I think as for black metal vocalists, there is only one inspiration, and Quarton from Battery.
Okay, so he was the biggest source.
Yeah, for him, and and also the presence and kind of intimacy of the expression from David Vincent, both of them. But it fascinated me how Quarton would, do these extreme vocals, but sometimes it would kind of break up into his regular voice, like when he sings the second chorus of For All Those Who Died, for example. He kind of breaks up into his regular voice, and this kind of vulnerability, whereas death metal is always extreme. It's always this kind of testosterone, But black metal, in the way I interpret it with Quarton and everything, it had this kind of desperation and fragility to it. So it lent itself, probably this is all in my head, to more of an emotional spectre, like in a similar way that soundtracks and classical music can go from this. It's not all on 11, So that fascinated me.
So were you first sort of like mimicking him and then figuring out your own way to do extreme type of vocals, or
so
how
my warm up would usually be to sing Battery songs, just to kind of get into that space.
So I was going to ask you later on about warm-ups, but has that remained the same for you throughout the years? The warm-up for the show?
No, I just scream for 5 minutes before I go on.
Okay, and that's been always the same for you?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
Because I can't really overdo it, with that kind of vocal. Because if you do it too much before you go on, it's suddenly, especially in the studio, I have a technique where I can hold back a little bit so that the voice will last through the entire show. In the studio, where you're giving 110%, usually I will maybe get 3 takes of a song, and then I'll have to wait another day because it's all broken.
I did an interview with like Behemoth Nergal before to this series, and he said that he wouldn't be able to sort of replicate the voice that he had on the early Behemoth albums. So how is it for you? Could you do like the similar type of singing that you do like for in the Night Side of Eclipse album, or has your voice sort of like evolved and singing style evolved in a way that you cannot sort of do it that way again?
I guess I would like to think that I am even more I'm more articulate now than I was when we recorded Eclipse, and especially the first EP, because I was very inexperienced. But of course we sing, we do a lot of those old tracks as well, and I pride myself in I always had quite a you don't have a pitch range, but of course the lung capacity, how you utilize the voice. So I always pride myself in making the screams just as long. I remember that it was this moment when we recorded the Eclipse where there's a song called Towards the Pantheon, and I think we timed it. The scream is 26 seconds long, and on the album it's a scream, and then I just take a breath and I keep on singing. So there's no edit.
Yeah.
So I pride myself in like doing that scream also live, to keep it for almost 30 second scream and then and go into it. It's tough, but
you still managed to do it.
I tried. It maybe a stupid thing, but it's
perfectionist, I guess also.
Nah, I wouldn't say that, but it's become part of the routine.
So what kind of like early memories when it comes to like the first proper tours that you did were like vocal wise, were you sort of ready stamina wise to do like show after show after show, because it's way different than playing?
We didn't
like
do any
weekends
proper tours until after we started the reunions.
Okay.
Because we've been talking about this. I mean, we went on tour in the UK in '93.
Yeah.
But it was not organized.
Okay.
We didn't have a plan. We just showed up with our instruments. We didn't have a tech rider or anything. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We just turned up. I was 17. What do you know when you're 17? And we didn't know anyone in the music business, who had been touring. And that we survived those early tours is down to pure luck and no real planning.
So are there like some specific foods or drinks that you wouldn't rather have before the show, that you have felt that they harm, like for example your vocal cords somehow, or on the opposite side, something that helps you with the singing?
I've often found that it's really important to get a lot of water, and sometimes I will occasionally eat some sticky chocolate, because it's this kind of voice, if it dries, your throat dries out, it becomes a very breathy quality to the voice, which I don't always like. I like to have control of that grittiness, and then you need a lot of liquid and some kind of moisturizing, and honey, especially in tours, when I kind of just drink honey a little bit, helps.
So obviously
usually it's just like trying to keep very healthy and eat sensibly, get enough sleep. It's very rock and roll like.
Yeah, but sleep is very, very important for vocalists.
Yes.
So
for touring in general, I think, regular healthy lifestyle. I'm at that age now. You have to make an effort these days.
Yeah, for sure. That's probably true. You have obviously released a lot of albums with Emperor and also as a solo artist. Are there like some specific albums that you could pinpoint from your career that you have felt that you have taken like a big step forward as a vocalist?
It's hard to say. There are certainly some albums that, in my mind, kind of stand out. But more just like on a musical level, you always experiment and try to push things, and then at some points, some ideas seem to gel into something special. you know, that and I would say from on top of my head is kind of albums that I feel, you know, had some of that. It was like maybe Anthems, you know, with Emperor. I think my third solo record, after I kind of landed in a different musical environment, and an album I did called Arctis, you know, the third Peccatum album we did. You know, there's certain albums that stand out, but that's more on the general vibe of things. Vocally, I think it's been more consistent in a way, and just me gradually being more and more focused on the performance in articulating and getting the lyrics across, you know, maybe more and more focused on the nuances of the expression rather than just the screaming. I find some vocalists in this genre, you know, who it becomes more like a sonic ingredient rather than a lyrical delivery, whereas I've always, I guess, been a bit consumed with getting the lyrics and expression across, for better or worse.
So I have a couple of questions left, and the second last one actually goes that what were your parents' reactions when they heard you screaming your lungs out for the first time? What kind of reaction did you get?
No, I think they just generally they were supportive of me doing music, you know, and no one really expected it to go anywhere. You know, it was you know, a nice occupation to do, and my dad was kind of not the soccer dad, you know, but the guy who drove to rehearsals and drove to shows.
So they were very supportive of you.
Yeah, just like, you know, that I had instruments. I grew up on a farm, so I could always play loud music. You know, I could rehearse with loud amp all the time. And it's just, as I explained earlier, it was very gradual growing from, you know, this style of music to that style of music. So I don't think they reacted in that way. They were accustomed. They heard the music I was playing in my room, and then me trying to perform something similar, I guess, was kind of a natural reaction to that.
So last question, any kind of advice that you would like to give to a young metal vocalist who is just about to start their journey? Anything that comes into your mind?
You know, whether you're a vocalist or a guitar player or anything, I just, my advice would be to do it, you know, wholeheartedly. Don't hold back, and do it for your own sake. You know, there's so much things that you have to do in this life. Playing rock music is not one of them. You do that because you love it, and if you do it in a way so that you love it yourself, and if you do that enough, you might be so good at it that someone else gets pleasure from what you do as well. But that's a bonus, you know. You don't, you know, if you expect your motivation to come from the outside, doing this style of music, you will be very disappointed. So you start with loving what you do yourself, and then maybe it expands from there.
Thanks a lot for doing this with us. No, good.
Bonus question, okay.
Okay, since we are now in Finland, how familiar you are with the Finnish death metal, black metal scene?
I would say as familiar as I am with the entire scene, you know, globally, and which I'm afraid is kind of limited. But it's almost reminded me the other day that I think it was we saw, I think, Abhorrence, that I think later became Amorphis, in Oslo, together with Cadaver and Darkthrone, back in 1990, I think.
Something like that.
Yes, and I remember also that was also the same year in Notodden, where I come from. There was death metal festival, and Disgrace was playing, you know. And then of course, you know, but it would be Harris and Impale Nazarene that I've been touring with, you know, so and lots of, so yeah, I feel there's like delegation, like the Norwegian and Swedish and Finnish extreme metal scene, you know, to be a bit broader, was very much at the same time, you know, and there was so much integration with, you know, the tape trading and also, yeah, playing each other's, you know, small festivals and everything. And also, I mean, the first show we did outside of Norway and this UK tour back in '93 that we did with Emperor was actually in Helsinki in '97.
Right.
I don't remember the name of the support band, but I remember they just played 2 songs because when I came up to the venue, you know, starting to prepare for the show, their show was already over after 2 songs, and the vocalist was outside in an ambulance with his arm half cut off. That stuff happened back in the day.
You mentioned tape trading, and that was a huge thing in the early 90s and in the 80s. Do you have anything special you remember from getting some, you know, crown jewel or something from somebody, you know?
No, not really, because I was so lazy with that stuff. So Samos, he'd get, you know, 30 to 40 letters every day. And he was so consistent, and his network around the world, as with many of his peers, you know, were immense. You know, getting letters and tapes from South America and all over the flyers and everything. I tried to do it, but I was just like, no, I can't be bothered. So I was always just, you know, there were no computers, but, you know, making music and playing. So I was just the nerd, I think.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the support.